Hi, my Simple Smart Science family. Today, I'm so excited. We're bringing on a very special guest that is a leading expert in dementia care. And through her brain optimization clinic and her memory care facility in San Diego, she's proving that reversing dementia is possible. Her latest study, published just last year in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, so really groundbreaking work, showed that nearly 75% of the dementia patients she worked with saw a significant cognitive improvement in just 6 months. So if you think there's nothing you can do for yourself or your family that's been diagnosed, think again. Dr. Heather Sandison is here to show us how she's getting these remarkable results and to talk about her new book, Reversing Alzheimer's. So welcome, Dr. Sandison.
Thank you for having me, Julia.
Wonderful. Well, it's so great having you today. We go back a little ways. My mom actually went through, when she got first diagnosed, went through the Recode program and started out with you doing all the testing. And I know that's where I first met you. And it was just random that it was in San Diego and you were the doctor that I met.
Yeah, it's so wonderful working with patients in a clinical setting. We can really dive into what is their personal smoking gun, if you will. What is it that's driving inflammation, or what is it that's driving the process of neurodegeneration in their brain? And then be precise about how we treat that. And so it's always a luxury when we have that. And yet, the clinical piece, as I've sort of seen the science unfold, as I've worked with more and more people, that's not the foundation, in my opinion. It's really the lifestyle that's so foundational and where we get so much of, I think, the heavy lift when it comes to seeing these remarkable results.
Let's dive into that because I know I was at the opening of your first house in San Diego, the first, I think it was the memory clinic, right?
Panorama,
And
yeah.
so, yeah, so what gave you the grand idea to do this, to create a facility? Tell us a little bit about the facility and tell us how you came up with this amazing idea.
Yeah, so essentially, as I was seeing patients in the clinical practice, I'd been trained by Dr. Bredesen in 2017, and then immediately started seeing patients, and there were patients getting better. I was surprised. I kind of came to this as a skeptic and didn't expect such good results in the clinical practice. And then you mentioned the study. So, kind of at the same time, in parallel, we were working on two projects. One was the clinical trial, because people were asking the question, a very, appropriate question. If I spend the money, if I take the time, if I put in the effort to do this for my loved one, how likely is it that they're going to get better? And I wanted to at that point, I was like, I don't know. We know that it happens for some people, but I don't know if it's 80% or 20% that are getting better. We just didn't have the data. And so we had this opportunity. We got funding for a clinical trial, which was really phenomenal. And we went through that process, but that took a long time to go through the IRB, to get everything lined up so we could start recruiting. It took about 18 months. So at the same time, I was getting the question, where do I send my loved one, right? I am the daughter of someone who's been diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's, and I get it. I get the Bredesen protocol. I fully intellectually understand it, but I do not have the capacity between my job and my family and everything else that I'm juggling to do this, to set everything aside and do this for my dad or my mom. So where do I send them? Where there's this like an immersive experience. And I looked around, and there really wasn't a place that had compelling immersive, like where the diet, the exercise, the socialization, the activities, where the environment, where everything was really designed for brain health in mind. It was kind of like, oh, you can do this add-on, and maybe your mom will choose to eat the keto diet or the organic diet, or I don't even think organic was an option, but maybe she'll choose to eat that, or maybe she'll have the cookie that's sitting on the table 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in the dining area, right? So there wasn't really an offering that looked like that. And so I kind of thought to myself, like, how hard can it be? And we had a house 9 months later. So we went through that process. I became a licensed administrator in the state of California. So I learned how to do that from the legal perspective and the licensing perspective, through the lens of California, the state of California. And we hired staff. It was a hospice facility. We turned that into Marama, an immersive experience in Dr. Bredesen's approach. And what we've done since then is start partnering with other existing senior living facilities, and taking part of their memory care and transforming it into memory recovery. And so that's really our goal. Also, our goal is to have an impact in the assisted living communities where maybe they're not adopting all of it in the way that we do in a memory recovery setting, but they're doing enough in terms of diet, exercise, engagement so that they can help people prevent the need for memory care later on.
I love that. So are you going in and like certifying the different facilities?
Yeah, we're doing it through a licensing model. Yeah, so
Okay,
we've got facilities kind of all over the US who have reached out who are interested in partnering with us to do this. So yeah, we're
that's
expanding it.
amazing.
Yeah, it's
Because
been
then you get
really
to see, I mean, that's our whole goal too, right? Just more boots on the ground to teach and stuff to do this. What are some like
exactly.
through your facility in San Diego with the really immersive living? What do you have like a really great juicy story that you can share with us
There
about some
are
of the
so many. I mean, so we had our first resident went home with a MoCA score of 30. So MoCA is the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. It's a way we put a number on how severe someone's dementia is, right? So 30 is perfect, normal, very normal. 26 and above is normal. So you can get a few wrong. This is a one-page worksheet where you identify zoo animals and you copy a clock or draw a clock, copy a cube, identify where you are in time and space. And then we give you this number. And it's not a test like that you want to get an A, well, you do want to get an A plus, right? But it's really the goal is to understand and be able to communicate between providers. Like, where is someone on this spectrum? And then also to know, are we getting better or are we getting worse? And so that's the utility it has both in a clinical setting and in a place like Marama. So we had a woman move in last fall. She was there for a full 6 months and she went home at the very beginning of May with a MoCA score of 30. She moved in with a MoCA score of 24, and she actually moved in on her birthday. So she moved in on her birthday, and as a gift to herself, she wanted to optimize her cognitive function. She felt like she was declining, and so it was subjective. She could feel that her brain wasn't working the way it had been, and we could measure it at that stage. It was no longer normal, but she was still in that earlier phase where she had a number in the 20s, whereas we have a lot of confidence there. As that number gets closer to zero, it's harder and harder for people to get better. It takes longer. But she had put in 6 months and moved home with a perfect MoCA score. It was really a day to celebrate. We were so excited. And
remarkable results?
yeah, really fun. You don't hear that often. There aren't really other places where you can go and have that happen, expect that turnaround. And there's another woman, it's been a really clear illustration because she moved in and her MoCA score was a single digit MoCA score. I think it was a 9 when she first moved in. Well, she was with us at Marama in San Diego for I think 9 or 10 months. I should have the details of this more readily available, but she basically lived with us for a little less than a year. And then her family wanted her to come home. She was doing way better. I think her MoCA score got up to a 22, 20, 22. I
From a
mean, just
nine?
yes, this crazy shift. And so she moved home. Her family wanted her close by. And then her son ended up needing to travel. Nobody was around as much as they kind of, I think, intended to be. She wasn't getting the diet. She wasn't getting the engagement. She went back to a 13 and a half. So she moved into our Kansas facility. And now she's at a 22 again. I mean, she's been there
That's
for 7 or 8
remarkable.
months. And I think that they're thinking about moving her home, but I have a much better grasp on how to deliver the protocol for her at home. But it was just wild. Like she came in really low, moved home, doing really phenomenally well, didn't get the program, diet, exercise, lifestyle, socialization, all of that fell to the wayside, moved back in, and now she's like back up and doing phenomenally well again, beating all the odds. I mean, it's just really fun to watch.
That is amazing. And I want to go, I want to dive deeper into that because I don't think people understand like a nine MoCA score. My mom was at a 7 last year and she barely remembers us anymore. She doesn't remember where she lives. She doesn't remember to eat. She doesn't, I mean, a 9 is low. It's really low. It's typically when someone is at that point where they're in memory care. They don't remember anything. They may or may not remember their family, their kids. They certainly don't remember what happened yesterday or last week. You have to repeat. I mean, that's real serious dementia at nine.
Oh yeah, you're dependent on others for pretty much everything. Maybe
Yeah.
you can still get dressed in the morning, but your shirt might be on backwards or
Yeah,
something like that. You're definitely not cooking for yourself. You're not living independently. Hopefully you can
right.
still go to the bathroom on your own, but even many people at that stage are having to use incontinence supplies and other things like that. So
Yeah,
yeah, this is very serious. Diagnosed Alzheimer's, right? Not
yeah,
mild cognitive
absolutely.
impairment, not one of these early stages, but really full-blown dementia.
That gives me goosebumps because that is, I mean, that's where my mom said she's below. I'm sure she's below. She forgot my brother for the first time the other day.
Oh,
So
I'm so
that's really, it's
sorry.
really
That is
heartbreaking,
so
right? And
hard.
you can, she walked into the kitchen, she opened the refrigerator door and she turned around and she said, "Who are you and what are you doing in my room?" to my brother. And
Sorry.
from both perspectives, I mean, he was astounded, but can you imagine from her turning, like walking into your kitchen, turning around, there's a complete stranger in your room, how scary it must be. And to take it from that to getting back 22, on the other hand, is almost perfectly normal. You may notice that they're slipping a little bit or forgetting a word here and there. Maybe they're, more dependent on their calendar, but really, really highly functioning,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and I think to your point, right, the heartbreak of this disease is the loss of connection and relationship with the people you love most, right? She didn't remember her son. That's heartbreaking for him. It's heartbreaking, I'm sure, and scary for her. When you're at a 22, you're buying, appropriate gifts for your grandkids at Christmas. You're in the game. You might not be driving or, it might be overwhelming to cook Thanksgiving dinner for 25 people or plan a trip to Europe and have all of the details organized on your own. But you can have a meaningful relationship. You can have a meaningful conversation. You can create memories. You can look forward to things. You can keep complex kind of concepts in your head and maybe you don't get all of the details right, but you're still present and engaged. You're still you. Whereas as you go down into those single digit MoCA scores, again, you are, from our perspective in society, I think you become a liability. Everyone needs to rally around you. There's a lot of labor that goes into taking care of you day to day. It's highly expensive and it's emotionally so draining for everyone involved because it's that long goodbye, right? I'm sure when your brother experienced her not remembering him, there's this grief, there's this next stage of grief. And there's those first stages when mom isn't able to host a big party, right? And that's one thing. But then when mom doesn't remember who you are, it's like this chipping away at that existence of this human that you have this really important relationship with.
It is death by a thousand cuts, right? And she is on, my aunt got Alzheimer's 13, 14 years ago, which is where I started this company. And she, looking back, went away. She passed away very quickly. Like within 1 year, didn't remember me, 2 years, didn't remember her kids, and they passed away right after that, 2 years. My mom, I mean, I took her to you in 2018 or 19, right? And this is a year after, I mean, this is her sixth, seventh year. And she's not on any medications, otherwise healthy as a horse. I mean, she's lost a ton of weight, but you cannot have a conversation with her anymore. You can't even ask her how she is. She doesn't get it. She doesn't understand. You can't tell her how your day is. You can't, we went to the planetarium with my son a couple weekends ago, and she doesn't know what a planetarium is. She doesn't know what a museum is. She doesn't even
Right.
know who my son is, right? She used to help me take care of him when he was a baby. She traveled around with us taking care of him when I did events. So to to just, I mean, that is for me so unbelievably remarkable that you can take somebody in single digits and get them back to 22 in just 10 months. And
Yeah,
then if she had stuck with it,
I
I mean,
know.
she would have been 100%. I mean, she can still get there, right? She can still get there. This is so amazing.
It's so interesting because I certainly would not have thought this was possible. So back when Marama opened, I remember thinking like there were people we turned away because they had single digit MoCA scores, and I thought I just don't have the confidence that we can get you better. And so I really need this to be successful from an outcomes perspective. We need to show that we can get outcomes. And so I don't want to take the risk with the people on the lower end. Well, we opened March 1st of 2020. So, right, COVID just upended everything. And as we were coming out of COVID, we were kind of reevaluating, okay, let's just bring everybody in because there were people who were really excited to do it. A lot of people had been affected by COVID. There were just all kinds of complications. And so there were some persistent families who were like, please take my mom, even though she's lower on the spectrum or higher on the she's progressed more down the dementia pathway. We think that this is the best place for her. And I'm so glad that it happened that way because they proved to me what's possible. And now everybody that moves in with a MoCA score of 8 or 9 is not going to go back up into the 20s. That's just not what we've seen. But there are these miraculous cases where that does happen. And we also don't know. I've only been doing this work since 2017. Dr. Bredesen has published his first paper showing that people 10 years later who had diagnosed mild cognitive impairment or early dementia due to Alzheimer's disease are still better. So years later, they're maintaining that cognitive function. And I do have a huge curiosity. Like, what if all senior living facilities looked like Marama? Could we avoid having most people go towards memory care? Could people live more meaningful lives in that last chapter? And I think that the answer to that is absolutely yes. Now, results are going to vary. There's going to be a spectrum of what that looks like and how much benefit we can get. But it's like, we might as well try, right?
Absolutely. It's something you and I should partner on because we've been looking at independent living facilities, right? And just 55 plus, because that's where if you can get them when they're 55, then you
Right.
can really make a difference, right? My personal vision is to reduce the amount of dementia cases by 50% by the year 2050. And it's doing this kind of work with all of us
The
collaborating
benefit.
together
Mhm.
that's going to get us there. It's preventative. It's making that measurable improvement today,
Yes,
right? It's going to
exactly.
prevent it in the future. Oh, I just love this. So, was there anything that this woman did that you saw gave her the extraordinary results I mean, versus anybody else? Like, what are you seeing that people are doing differently that's getting them better results than just kind of the average person?
She's very involved. So she's very excited and interested and engaged in the program. So we certainly see that consistently. When someone shows up and they're fighting, kicking and screaming to do the exercise or to eat the vegetables, it's harder to get the results that we're looking for. When somebody comes in and they're excited and engaged and they get why they're there and they want to get better and they're willing to do what it takes, they can get through that discomfort that in that first 4 weeks or so, 4 to 6 weeks, there's an adjustment period. And
Sure.
she's very social. So she's showing up for every meal, she's sitting down, she's engaging with everyone, she's showing up every time there's exercises or activities, and she's fully present in them. She also has been very involved in her church long term, and I think a lifelong meditator. And so I think her brain is sort of primed for a lot of this.
That's great. So it's just much more, it's just doing more of the work, right? It's doing more.
Essentially, yeah. It doesn't work if you don't do it. And
Right.
yeah.
So when these people are in this setting and they're fully immersed, because I know originally one of my initial thoughts was, oh, I don't know that I would be able to do that with my mom. I mean, that change, that stress of moving her in and then 6 months later moving her out, like moving is so stressful for people that have cognitive decline. And at the time, I think she was at 19 on the MoCA score, right? So how do you kind of handle that? And then how are you, you just said, you're able now to have them take it home better.
Yeah.
So
So the goal is for people to recover their memory, but we have had people at Marama who's been there since 2020. So it really depends on the family and what makes the most sense for them. So like one woman, she has her house is rented out. She has long-term care insurance. She actually makes money living at Marama, right? Because of the way that it all works. So financially, it makes sense for her. And and she's getting great care. And she's since she's been there, she lost her cat, she lost her husband, she's gotten COVID, she's had a lot happen. And her memory has gone up and down. It's fluctuated between 9 and 12, and sometimes she'll go up to 15, 16, and then she'll get hit with COVID and it drops or hit with something else. And then she's recovered. And so for her family, that makes the most sense from many perspectives. She's close to her doctors. There's a lot of people around who can support her in terms of her friends. She's close to the neighborhood where she raised her daughter. Although her daughter isn't that close anymore, there's a network of support for her, and it makes sense for her to be here. So that has gone on for years. I think that
So
the
she's
plan
just
for her to
that's
stay
just kind of her
indefinitely.
long-term solution then is just to
Right.
stay. Okay,
Yeah, and
okay.
other families have made that same, she's not the only one. Other families have come to the same conclusion. At this cost, this makes the most sense for us compared
Mhm.
to other options because caring for someone at home is much more expensive. You don't have the economy of scale of the caregivers and of the environment and the food, right? We pay a chef and there's all these people involved in caring. And when it's just one person to have that one-on-one care or potentially two-on-one care at times is very costly and much more than it costs to live in a senior living facility. So it just depends on the family and what their goals are. So that initial move in, there's a bit of stress with that, right? Anyone with dementia, it's overwhelming. It's a very big deal to move. And many people have been in their homes for decades, right? And this is the move that they're making. And our goal is that they're able to move back into independent living. Or so in some cases, it's like somebody's moving in and they're doing mold remediation at their home. So they were going to have to move out anyways. Where do they want to go? They want to go somewhere where they can get the full benefit of all the detox and all of the food and, everything that we have there. So the plans are different. It just depends on the dynamics of the family. But most memory care, it only goes in one direction. You move in and you stay forever. Here, there's this window of opportunity of where, well, potentially, if mom is better, then maybe she can move home and move back towards independent living. Or maybe she moves home and it's not as much of a burden on the family to care for her because she has more capacity when she gets back. And that also can buy us time. She's there for 6 months or 12 months or whatever it is. It can buy us time for the family to kind of get things in order. All right, we're going to line up chefs for seniors, or we're going to get the equipment so that it's here. We're going to figure out who is their grandchild or a sibling or someone nearby who can come 3 days a week and help her go through the exercise circuit. And maybe they can't do it tomorrow, but maybe he's going to graduate in the fall and we'll have more availability, right? It gives us time to kind of put those logistical pieces in place so that then the move home, we can keep as much of the program going as possible.
So let's dive into that a little bit because I love the immersive facility. I think it's just for someone to be able to go there and just have, I mean, the hope, right? Because these people don't have hope. But what do you do for people that aren't going to move into this immersive facility? What kind of things are helping them that you're working with them on?
Yeah, so that's actually where the book came from. A few years ago, a friend of mine encouraged me to create a course. And, I was like, oh, everybody's got an online course. Like, I guess, I didn't really see the utility in it. And then I put it out there and like hundreds of people bought it. And I was like, oh, okay. Like there are people that are interested in this. I guess that this is worth pursuing. And then I felt a little embarrassed because I was like, I didn't do that good of a job the first time we put the course out there. So we kept iterating it. We basically just kept improving the course. And then the course is what became the book. So the goal with, I mentioned that like we did the study because people were asking how often, how likely is it for someone to get better? And
Mhm.
we found if your MoCA score is between 12 and 23, 74% of the time in 6 months, people are measurably better. Now, they might not be 100% better, but most of the time people are better. And then somebody asked like, hey, we don't have a place to send mom or dad. So we created Marama. And then when we created Marama, we only had 12 beds available in San Diego County. So people were coming from all over the country. And many families were like, I don't want to move my mom to San Diego. I want her down the street from me or in my house with me. I want to care, or my spouse. I want to care for them at home, but I want them to get the benefit of what you're doing at Marama. Can you teach us how to do this? And so that's where the course came from. And also because my friend was like, you should make this online course. And we got such great feedback from it. And then that was where the book came out of all of our learnings of teaching people how to do this remotely so that they could incorporate as much of what we're doing at Marama in from the comfort of their own homes, right? Nobody wants to move into senior living. Nobody wants to move into memory care. I mean, that's just for many people, it's their worst nightmare. My mom literally had said out loud, shoot me if I need that, right? Like she's not refusing to get long-term care insurance because she does not ever want to be in that position because of what she saw as a nurse. And so understandably so, people are trying to avoid that fate. And I also think that, from a societal perspective, if we can keep our loved ones, if we can keep our elders in our community, going to their churches and volunteering, hanging out with grandkids and great grandkids, like getting that wisdom transfer from intergenerational wisdom transfer, that is so much more valuable than having people siloed away in memory care facilities. And so ultimately, that would be the goal, is that we all do this as prevention well before we think we need it. The challenge is convincing people, and we live in a society where the foods that are really best for us are not as convenient to prepare, right? When you have to cook for yourself versus getting pizza delivery, right? That's highly palatable, highly profitable, but terrible for our heart health and our brain health and our metabolic health long term. Basically encouraged to sit and scroll and watch TV and veg out and not get as much exercise as is good for us. There's a lot of societal pressure to basically have an unhealthy lifestyle. What's least expensive? What's affordable? And so I think that it requires a lot of effort, and it's a movement. It's like, okay, we are not settling for what's generally available through medicine, through food, through like what's encouraged from a lifestyle perspective. We're going to request more and demand more and be willing to do the work to get better outcomes as we age.
Yeah, and I saw a study last year, and a study, but a stat that said that for the first time, more people went to see alternative doctors, such as yourself, than they went to go see their primary care physicians. And I
Wow.
think it is a movement, right? It's really big that people are starting to realize, wait, this stuff they're pumping into us, it's addicting, it's incredibly unhealthy, and we're looking worse, we're feeling worse, we're acting worse, and we're reacting to everything. And that's just not how we want to live,
Right.
right? And we know that you and I know that long term, that's what's going to put us into the facilities. Because you talked about cost. My mom, we have a really great situation. I'm really hoping we can keep it. She's still in independent living, but we have a full-time nurse that is there. And so she's still able to go down and have meals. She's with everybody and they have tons of activities she tries to do. Normally she just sits there and watches. But we've been told that she's definitely well beyond where she should be in this independent living facility. And so we've been looking around at memory care, and in Denver, it's $7,000 to $9,000. And typically, you're looking at this little house that has maybe two or three people, and they are just sitting there watching TV all day, and they're eating donuts, and they're having cookies, and if you want, they're just making these people sicker and sicker and sicker. And so I don't even want to put my mom into these memory care facilities because at least where she is, I understand she needs a higher level of care besides her nurse that's there. And, she's not there 100% of the time. She has other clients in the building. So she kind of comes in and checks on her multiple times throughout the day. But yes, my mother did leave the apartment with pants on the other day. I understand that this stuff is happening, right? And that she needs a higher level of care, but can't imagine putting her in one of these places where they're just sitting there watching TV all day. I mean, talk about take me out and shoot me. This is this is not how we need to be treating people. And unfortunately, she's well beyond a point where she can transfer of intergenerational knowledge, that's what breaks my heart the most. Right? I
Yeah.
can't ask my mom advice around my son or marital advice or anything. Right? She's gone, but she's still there, and it's torturous. It's
Ab-
torturous,
yeah.
right? So this is just so important for all of us to really realize the preventative stuff. So let's dive into that in your book now. Let's talk about like when I pick up your book and I'm reading it, what's the one thing you really want people to take from it?
Yeah, I wanted them to feel empowered, that there not only is there not nothing that you can do to optimize your cognitive function anywhere on the spectrum, there's actually an overwhelming amount that you can do. And instead of that overwhelm turning into paralysis, my goal with the book is that you feel empowered, that you don't have to do everything yesterday, that you can start with things that are either simple and easy, or that you know are going to get you the most benefit, the most leverage. So for many people, this is diet, right? It's changing your diet. And we recommend going into ketosis, an organic ketogenic diet. That's what we offer at Marama. Now, there's a very recent study Dr. Dean Ornish published in the early June of 2024 that showed that in 5 months, so our trial was 6 months. Dr. Bredesen did a similar trial over 9 months. And what we did were feasibility studies. So we compared baseline, so when our participants were recruited to 6 months or 9 months, depending on which study we're talking about. And in our trial, we recruited people who were between MoCA scores of 12 and 23. Dr. Bredesen's trial, they were MoCA scores of 19 and above. So they still have measurable cognitive impairment through one testing is through one test or another, but they weren't as progressed as we were. So they saw that 84% of their participants improved. We saw that 74% of our participants improved, but we had a shorter amount of time, and we had patients who were more progressed through the dementia pathway. Now, Dr. Dean Ornish, what he published in June of 2024 was the first randomized controlled trial looking at a control group where they didn't do lifestyle interventions compared to a group that did lifestyle interventions, including diet. They took supplements. They were in a support group, so they were getting socialization. They were not socially isolated. They were doing stress management practices and exercise. And in just 5 months, right? So we had a 6-month study, a 9-month study that showed that lifestyle intervention and functional medicine improved cognition. He showed that in just 5 months, lifestyle alone improved cognition compared to controls. They used a vegan diet. So we use an organic ketogenic diet that can contain animal protein. And we actually encourage people to not do vegan and keto at the same time because that can be very, very limiting, and we can go in the direction of weight loss and frailty. So, but what I love about this trial is one, of course, it's a randomized controlled trial, so that has a lot of credibility from a research perspective, but also it shows us there's not one right diet, which I think has always been the case, right? I do think that the ketogenic diet is probably better for brain healing and brain recovery. But if you aren't ready to go keto, go vegan, go plant-based. Or if you've been going keto and that's maybe worked for a while, but you're going to be traveling or something's coming up logistically, go vegan for a while and then switch back and forth between them so that you don't get bored and you can change your diet with the season. I think that ultimately that's what we'll see is these ancestral type diets. The consistent thing about them was inconsistency. And so what we want is to be able to change our diet, to adapt it and to shift with the seasons, not just the seasons of the year, but the seasons of our lives. And as we age, we may need something different than what we needed in our 40s, or, cycling women versus postmenopausal women may need different nutrients. And so I think that there's a lot to look, there's so much hope. And the point of the book was basically to give people hope. And I think the latest research is saying that there's more than one right way to do this. And just taking action to cut out highly processed foods from your diet, that's going to be brain healthy. And then we have, of course, in the book, we have lots of exercise tips. We talk about dual task exercise and sleep optimization, creating routines so that this becomes part of your life. It's not this thing I'm going to do for 6 months, but it's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life to protect my brain.
So how would you say that this book is different from other Alzheimer's books? And I know you're very close to Dr. Dale Bredesen. He was actually at your opening, which is great. That's the first time I met him. And he has a book as well. How would you say that yours is the standout book for your clients and what you're trying to get across?
Yeah, so ours is very, very much the health coach kind of version. So Dr. Bredesen's book, I have his book right here, actually, The End of Alzheimer's Program, right, where he talks through, this is probably the most similar to my book, but his work has been very much on the medical side. So as we started this conversation, you mentioned bringing your mom in, doing the medical pieces of looking for that smoking gun. Is it heavy metals, or is it mold toxicity, or is it infections? What is that thing that's driving inflammation? And I think that I'm a functional medicine provider. I'm a naturopath, right? Like, this is my work in the world, is to do these tests. And yet what I've seen through the coaching and through what we've done at Marama is that the foundation, the most important part, is the lifestyle. It's what we choose to eat every day. It's how much movement we choose to get. It's what time we go to bed. It's who we call that day to make plans with. It is how we manage our stressors. Those decisions, they seem like small decisions, but when we make them day after day after day, even multiple times throughout the day, what we decide to put in our mouths, that is what changes the trajectory of how we age. And so the emphasis, I have a chapter on partnering with your provider and what labs to ask for and things to consider, but the emphasis of my book is not the medicine. It's the lifestyle and how to make really practical steps, take those really practical steps to create a routine and to create habits so that you're making those brain healthy choices as the rule, not the exception.
What are some of the other things? So we have diet, and I love that you talked about vegan versus, because we typically don't recommend vegan either. Typically, the brain does do much better on animal products. And it's good to see that there's a study that shows that vegan does work as well, because there's some people for moral or religious reasons, ethical reasons, want to stay vegan. So it's great to see that that's in there. What are some other things that people that you're, kind of the big takeaways of your book? I of course want them to go read your book, and we're gonna show you where to get that after this. But like, what are some other good takeaways that they can start looking forward to doing when they're reading your book?
Yeah, so diet, we chatted about exercise. We talked through 4 different types of exercise. Most people are familiar with getting some sort of aerobic exercise. Strength is also really important. We want some balance between those two, typically about 200 minutes a week. You'll see recommendations between 150 and 300 minutes a week, but you want to be getting regular, moderate to vigorous exercise. We talk a lot about dual task exercises. So DUAL, dual, is 2 things at once, where you're cognitively engaged at the same time as physically engaged. So this might be as simple as walking and talking, or it might look like going to a class, a Zumba class or a yoga class or Pilates class, where you're cued by an instructor and you have to use your brain to think through, wait, right arm up to left knee, and you have to think through those cues. Also, ballroom dancing, another great consideration. So we also set this up. I'm like an efficiency queen. So if I do something, I want it to check multiple boxes. So something like pickleball, especially if you're in more of a prevention mode, you're getting social engagement. You're often outside. There's high hand-eye coordination. There's strategy. And then, of course, you're being physically active. And so we can check a bunch of boxes when it comes to how we want to engage our brain. And there, you can think through ballroom dancing, similar, right? There's the music, that's stimulating our brain. There's the social engagement of getting together with other people. There's that awareness, that spatial awareness, where I am in relationship to my partner or on the dance floor. There's, of course, remembering the steps. There's the cues, potentially an instructor when you're dancing in a class. And so all of these things, we've heard for a long time that ballroom dancing is good for memory. This is a little bit of an explanation of why we're getting that dual task engagement. So I had a patient, she was in our clinical trial, and her granddaughter was living with her kind of temporarily as she was going through nursing school. And she was very interested in what we were doing, very interested in health and wellness. And so she would come to the visits with grandma. And she really loved this idea. Grandma had always been an exerciser. She'd always gone to the classes, but I think it was like she'd been going to the same classes for 30 years. I mean, they were in the house they had raised their kids in. She went to the gym in their community. And I think it was kind of the point where like she knew what the instructor was going to say before she said it, even though she struggled cognitively. Like it was just so much part of her routine. She hadn't mixed it up for a long time. So when her granddaughter heard about dual task exercises, she was like, I have a great idea. We're going to go for walks in the neighborhood, and we're going to go up and down the hills and use the weights because she's pretty fit. But what she started with was having her remember she was having trouble with dates. So it was like the dates of birthdays of all the grandkids and anniversaries, the days that people got married in the family, and all of these dates that were important to her emotionally. Well, once she had that box checked, she knew all those. Then they started learning all the names of the neighbors. So who lives in that house and how old are their kids, and like all these details about the neighbors, which was again emotionally compelling, something that she
Yeah,
was interested in. She was very social and active in her
yeah.
community. And then she also was interested in nature. So they started learning the names of the trees and the names of the birds. And then they started learning the Latin names of the trees and the Latin names of the birds. And they just kept kind of upping the ante in terms of the cognitive engagement and what she was remembering as they were walking. And they also would up, the weights, or they would do more hills, or the granddaughter was just really great at finding something. And also, grandma wanted to go with her granddaughter. That alone, that was emotionally compelling, right? That was a person she wanted to show up with and spend time with. And so she was excited whenever it was time to go for their walk, and she wanted to impress her. She wanted to like do it right. And it was really sweet to watch their relationship evolve and for them to get to spend that time together. and also to watch it help improve her cognition. Granddaughter moved out and she slid backwards. It was a little bit sad to see, but then her husband got somebody else engaged to come and show up and do this with her. So even though it shifted a little bit after she finished nursing school and got a job and moved out, there was this like aha moment of, oh my gosh, this was making a big difference. She was already, I think when they initially came in, she was like, oh, exercise, I got that. I've been doing that forever. I've been going to these classes. I'm fit, I'm strong. And then what we saw was when we shifted it, there was this really dramatic improvement.
Oh, amazing. I love it, just sparks ideas for me to bring in community so that people have other people to do this with, right? And I think that's a big missing piece here is people feel so alone when they're going through this. They don't want to tell anybody. They're embarrassed. And I think a really big takeaway is that you're not alone and that there is a community, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think so many people experience that moment of like, okay, mom or dad or my spouse has been diagnosed, and like I never wanted to think about dementia. Why would we think about that? That like sounds horrible, right? And then they want to know everything they feel like they need to know everything yesterday because they want to deliver like the best possible care. And yet I think there's this window, if we can think about it earlier, if we can start with prevention sooner, we get even more benefit from this approach.
So what do you say to somebody? Because we work with a lot of people that are, 55 plus, 65, right? Maybe they don't feel as sharp as they used to. Maybe their parents are getting dementia or Alzheimer's. And what do you say to them to shake them to their core? Because that's where we can make the biggest difference,
Yeah.
right? That's when we can absolutely change their lives. But how do you get somebody that's still drinking sodas and still munching on potato chips as snacks? How do you motivate that person to make the changes?
Isn't for everyone. So I think it's criminal that not everyone knows that there's something you can do for Alzheimer's and dementia, but it's not my job to convince people. The information is there. You can give them a book or you can, send them an article. But I don't feel like it's our job to tell people what to do, right? It's to give information and then people have to be motivated to do that themselves. So this isn't going to be for everyone. The person that wants to eat chips and have cookies and is waiting for a pill, a magical pill to solve this problem, that's not the person that's going to get the most from this program. They're just not going to be able or willing to do it. You have to be both of those things, right? Even when we recruited for the trial, people had to be willing to change their diet and lifestyle. If they weren't, it was a non-starter, right? It doesn't work if you don't do it. And so I think that there's no judgment from me about what you decide to do. I just think everyone should have the information. No one should be told that there's nothing you can do. Everyone should have the information that you can change your diet, you can exercise, you can manage your stressors, you can treat your treat your sleep apnea, use your CPAP. All of those things can help cognitive function. And if you want to do them, here they are. There's your offer. But if you just like taking a pill, some people will decide they don't want to swallow the pill. It's up to them ultimately. And it can be very challenging and very heartbreaking. And I think the person who I've seen a lot of daughters who are like, or son, people who want this for their parents or want this for their spouse. They're like, I can't believe mom isn't doing this, and I'm trying so hard to get her to. Like, stop, give her a break. Just focus on you. Take all that energy and all that angst and all that fear and use that energy to make better decisions for your brain health. That's what you have control over. We don't have control over other people and their decisions. We have control over ourselves. And ultimately, if you're doing really well, right? If you're the daughter, sometimes we'll see siblings arguing, right? Like, oh, my brother doesn't think that this will work. Well, if you're the daughter who's really interested in this and you're doing all the brain healthy lifestyle things, and maybe you're getting the testing and taking the supplements, and you look really healthy and you're showing up cognitively sharp, and your brother's not doing as well, like that speaks for itself. You become the model.
I want to shake people and say, I wish you could just see, but I know better because my mom was one of those people who would not take care of herself her whole life. She had all the knowledge. She had a lot of knowledge. She was doing, all this stuff back in the 60s and 70s and breath work and yoga and meditation and Young Living oils, but she just it was these phases, right? I mean, I couldn't even get her to take a supplement. So it's she just you can only lead a horse to water. And so that's why if this alone, this video motivates somebody to go make the changes, that's what we're trying to get to. But I think, and I know if they read your book, it'll really, really motivate them. So why don't you tell us where they can get your book? I see a couple copies of it behind you there if you want to grab one and show everybody. Um, but yeah, let's talk about your book and where they can get it, because I think that's going to be the best place for them to start and to get motivated to do the work.
Yeah, the book Reversing Alzheimer's is available wherever books are sold. HarperCollins is our publisher, making it available at Target, at bookshop.org, at Amazon, of course. So it's available. We hit the New York Times list, so hopefully it'll be in even more bookstores and available. We'll kind of run with that momentum and have it. I'd love for it to be available in airports. I feel like it's a perfect plane read, but we'll see.
That's the big one, the plane read. I love, well, congratulations on the success of it. That's phenomenal. We will definitely put a link to your book below this video when we publish it. And I'm just so excited to see everything you've done, Dr. Sandison. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Julia. It's such a privilege to be here with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.